Once the photos were ready and she sent them to us, I was just blown away by how much seeing that physical picture of our pain and our suffering was portrayed in just a few pictures.
Welcome back to Straight Talk on Life Issues. I'm Victor Nieves, as always, joined by Brad Mattis, president of Life Issues Institute.
You know, Victor, when I first saw the results of Angela's work online, my first reaction was, we have got to promote this on our podcast and radio program. Her work is absolutely amazing. And for those who are listening, you have got to go see them for yourselves. You know, men and women often deeply suffer from guilt and pain after abortion, and their grief can be overwhelming.
Well, and though some people may say that they feel short-term relief, the vast majority of women and men, they carry an overwhelming sense of loss.
But let me tell you, the photographs and stories that she has produced are uniquely amazing and beautiful.
And as we'll hear, those photographs continue to help women and men who have lost their children to abortion find forgiveness and healing. Today, we're joined by Angela Forker. She was formerly a missionary of 15 years. God took her from the mission field and made her a newborn photographer. Now her photography has reached millions of lives around the world and is sharing the sanctity of human life. We're also joined by Paula Page. She's an abortion survivor. Now she's happily married. She has children, grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren. We're also joined by Chuck and Linda Raymond. They experienced an abortion together as teenagers that greatly impacted their lives. Today, the couple is now involved in the Silent No More awareness campaign and the abortion healing ministry retreats. Angela, Paula, Chuck, and Linda, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi there.
Hello and welcome.
This is going to be a fun program because I have seen the work of Angela and have become a big fan. So let's just jump right into it. But first, Paula, Linda, and Chuck, we want to hear your stories. And let's start with you, Paula.
Well, my mom and dad had 2 children. The first child passed away day after birth, and then my mom got pregnant quickly. 11 months later, she had my brother, who was also premature, 7 months. And then right after he was born, she found out she was pregnant for me. My dad was an unemployed carpenter, and the doctor would not give my mother medical care because he owed him too much money. So my dad didn't know what to do. They ended up going to terminate the pregnancy. And I didn't know this story until I was 30 years old. I found out after my 4th child was born. My father told me one night, and I thought he was talking about somebody else. And then I thought he was joking. And then when I realized it was me, I just was speechless. So I worked with that a little bit and tried to work it through my head. Then about a month later, I had a talk with my mom, and she told me about what it was like to go to the abortion clinic, which was really heart-wrenching for me to have to hear what she went through. She told me how she went into this ward. There was 6 or 8 beds. It was very medicinal and cold and not inviting, and metal beds. This was back in the early 50s. And the other ladies that came in and had their procedure done, they left, and she was the last one to leave because her procedure didn't complete. So anyway, they came in at the end of the time waiting and said, well, we're closing, so you have to leave. So she went home, and a month or so later, she felt movement in her abdomen and realized that I was still there.
Wow.
And and she was happy. Neither one of them wanted to abort me. It wasn't because they didn't want me. It was because they couldn't take care of me, afford me. And I guess that was an easy thing to do. So that's the way it worked out. But I have a scar on the side of my face here from where my foot was laying beside my face when I was born. I also have a little scar right there on my neck where the heel of my foot was laying. So my foot was laying here, my left foot, and my left knee is deformed because of the way it formed in my mother's womb. I didn't walk till I was 3, and I was never able to kneel on my knee like most people can. And now I've got arthritis in it, and even after knee replacement, it still doesn't work properly. But I don't look at it as a handicap. I look at it as life, and I've just learned to live with it.
Well, abortion was illegal then.
It was, yep.
This
And
was an illegal abortion facility, and where was it?
we lived in Connecticut at the time, and I believe it was Portland, Maine.
Mhm.
It was illegal there too, but my father knew people.
So what did they give your mom to cause the abortion or try to?
It was an instrument abortion, and they probably used saline too, but neither one of them worked. God said no.
And when he says no, that's
When
the
he
final
says
word.
no, that's the last word. Yep.
Well, thank you, Paula. Linda and Chuck, let's briefly hear your story.
Chuck and I met as teens at our after school job and quickly started dating. Pretty quickly, we became intimate and we had an unexpected, unplanned pregnancy as a result of our intimacy. Our parents had never met each other. We had been dating about a year and a half at that point, and we met one night with our two sets of parents, and it was quickly decided by our parents that that was the best thing for us to do is to have an abortion. So at the time I was 18, Chuck was 17. He was a senior in high school, he was applying to the United States Military Academy at West Point. And so that was a big, big thing. Senior year, I was in my first year of college. So pretty quickly, we had the abortion. It was absolutely the worst mistake in my life. We had no support, no one we could reach out to discuss options or just have the support going through it. And it was pretty brutal. Probably the worst day of my life. I would have to say that because it impacted us the rest of our lives in very, very negative ways.
What year was this?
This was 1976, in January 1976. So, and our parents, I think, were just swept up in, hey, it's legal. It's something that we can do. We can take care of this problem quickly and they can both get on with their lives. Well, pretty in short order after the abortion, we squashed it, didn't talk about it again. My mother threatened that she didn't want this to be spoken of again. And that's kind of the way things went. Chuck did receive his appointment to the military academy and left in June of 76. And I was at home finishing my college degree and starting to do work on my degree. So 5 years went past and Chuck graduated from the military academy. We got married the day after, and we were in the military. We were in the Army for 6 years because you extended. Yeah, 6 years. And we had 2 children. In between those 2 children, Satan came into play, I'm positive, because I was expecting child number 2, and I miscarried that child on the same date that I had my abortion in January of 76. It was just
It was tough.
Ouch.
it was crushing. So throughout our marriage, I've suffered very, very deep depression, been hospitalized for it, went to many, many therapists, and really never got to the root. I don't think I was able to get back to the abortion with any of these therapists until we met someone who was trained in post-abortive couples and their pain and guilt and anguish. And so I was able to get some healing from those events with that therapist. From there, we went on to get further healing with Project Rachel here in St. Louis. And then also we attended a Rachel's Vineyard retreat weekend, which really started us on our path. And today, of course, many decades later, I feel strongly that God took our terrible, terrible mistake and our shame and our guilt and turned it into good for his glory. Because today, Chuck and I are out there. We serve on a couple of ministry teams and other abortion healing ministries in effort to keep the memory of our son, Ryan Paul, alive and help other women and men to try to not make this terrible choice. Abortion is just wrong. It's a wrong choice for women, and it just damages our culture and our society.
Well, I think I end up saying this most every program we do, and that is out of the ashes of our lives, God does some really mighty things, doesn't he?
Absolutely. Thank you for affirming that. Yeah, thank you.
And as far as east is from the west, so has he removed our sins from us. So when Satan reminds you of your past, you remind him of his future, and he will flee because it is really ugly. Thank you for sharing that. Paula, you alluded to how you felt after finding out that you an attempted abortee. Give us a little more detail and how that impacted you emotionally.
Initially, I felt like I wasn't wanted and all the emotions that you'd probably think about. And I wasn't wanted, but not for the reasons that I thought. I thought that in the beginning, I thought, well, they didn't want me, and so why am I here? But then when I realized the story about the fact that it wasn't that they didn't want me, it's that they couldn't afford me or the doctor wouldn't take care of my mother. And as an adult, I was 30 years old at the time. As an adult, I could understand it a lot better than I would have understood it at a younger age before I had children. And it impacted me, but forgiveness came in the future and it was fine. I understood.
Did you have that peace with your parents? I'm assuming they're no longer with us.
They're not. My dad passed away 13 years ago, and my mom is 25 years ago. But yes, absolutely. Then when I got older, I was told that I couldn't have children. And I also suffered 4 miscarriages before I had my 4 children. And I thought, I'll never have any children. And these people were leaving children in garbage cans and, you know, different places. And I said, just give me a baby. I promise God I'll take care of it, you know. And so my mother-in-law came to me one day and she said, God told me you're going to have a baby. And I looked at her and I scoffed like after my 4th miscarriage. And I said,
Just
sure.
like Sarah.
I said, like Sarah, no thanks. I don't want to wait till I'm 90. Exactly. That's what I said. And so 11 months later, I gave birth to our first child and she was 5 weeks early. I had to stay in bed the whole pregnancy, which was not fun, believe it or not. But she's 45 today and she was in Angela's wedding. So that's how well we
Mhm.
know each other. And then after that, 14 months later came a son, 16 months later came another son, and 18 months later came the youngest one. So in 4.5 years, I had 4 miscarriages, and in 4.5 years, I had children. So I look at it that God gave it back to me because I honored him and I trusted and I believed. And again, God had the last word. The doctor didn't.
Mm.
Just imagine the generational impact of abortion had
Oh, yeah,
the abortionist succeeded.
yeah. My children all know about it and they've encouraged me to tell my story.
Well, Paula, you spoke to some of the physical side effects of the attempt on your life. Could you tell us more about how that's impacted you throughout your life, the post-abortion situation?
Well, I had lots of names in school, Lumpy and Scarface and Cyclops and all kinds of names like that. I was always picked last for whatever sport was going because I couldn't run well, couldn't walk well, can't do stairs easily. Even now I do them one at a time. Of course, I'm 71 years old now, but I couldn't even do them when I was younger. But yeah, that the scar, I don't even see it anymore. And when people ask me, what's wrong with the scar on your face? Doctors will ask me, what happened? Did you have an accident or surgery? And I'll say, no, it was a birth defect. And if they get more questionable, I'll explain, but that's usually enough to make them happy.
Well, you can tell them at least your foot wasn't in your mouth.
My brother tells me that all the time. Yeah,
He
my
must be a
brother, he
great
never
guy.
misses a moment to tell me that. It's been there a few times, honestly. Uh,
Linda, how did you feel after the abortion? What was it like emotionally for you?
Immediate shame, guilt, and of course, physical pain. The emotional pain, I think, was much greater because the physical pain would fade over time, but the emotional pain has stayed with me my entire life. I don't feel it as deeply anymore because I have had the healing and spiritual help that I've had over the years, but it was immediately after, as soon as we walked out of there, I thought, what have I done? I just left a child in pieces in that building. It was devastating.
Chuck, how about you? I know that men hurt too because I counsel them after abortion. What was that like for you, especially leaving her then afterward?
Yeah, Brad, my journey is a good bit different in my healing. As Linda said, the kind of the plan was that we had solved this terrible problem. We had made the pregnancy go away. I forced myself to believe that that was a valid choice, that because our parents had advised it so strongly that that was the right thing to do. And the mission now was to move on, to forget about it and not talk about it. And I honestly did not have the emotional maturity to recognize all the pain that Linda had. The abortion was in January of 76. In July, early July, I left to go to basic training in the Army. And so, there's a complicated bit of emotions. We were anticipating being away from each other and trying to figure out how we're going to stay together when we're separated. And, that was painful. But it wasn't clearly in my heart connected to the woundedness that she still had. I think Angela captured the conflict in our relationship very well. That
Oh,
speaks so powerfully to the love and the warmth that we had. I don't know how you did that, Angela, but and the commitment that we had to each other, but also the separation, the big hole in our communications, my lack of understanding what was really going on emotionally for her. And then, of course, I got in the Army. I was playing, Joe Rock soldier, be tough, be ready to go, fight in a war. So that kind of helped close my emotional ability to connect to bad things. And so this poor sweetheart here really had to endure all of this for a good number of years before we were even back together all the time, which was 5 years later when we got married. As an aside, what a miracle that God gifted us with the ability to stay together, through all of that. And as you know, statistically, very, very few relationships hold up, through an abortion. And
That's right.
I guess a number of different things, but God kept us together, and it's been going up on 50 years now.
Mm,
So
that's great.
Angela, share with us how you first came to use photography as a way to minister to men and women who have lost children to abortion.
So my husband and I were missionaries. We were missionaries to Germany and to Italy, and God said he had a big change coming. He told me to learn newborn photography fast and well. So I started off as a newborn photographer, and that's so weird to me, going from missionary to newborn photographer, but I was just following God. My husband, we came back to the States. My husband's pastoring a church here, and I became a newborn photographer 10 years ago, actually. This year marks 10 years for both. And the first thing that happened was in 2017, I was praying and I said, so God, I was a missionary and now I'm a newborn photographer, trying to figure out like, how does this even make sense? And I said, is there any way you can use this? And the first thing God asked me to do was to pray a prayer of blessing over every new baby that came to me. And so I was like, whoa, I don't know if you know this, God, but I'm a business and businesses don't do that. And what was incredible is that was 2017. During that time, even just in a matter of a couple of years, I had prayed over more unchurched people than I had during our whole 15 years as missionaries. So that was the first step. Like, I believe God wanted to know, will you be faithful in something that's seemingly small, which was actually very big, because I've prayed over Hindus, Muslims, atheists, like you name it. And out of those hundreds and hundreds of people, only 2 people have refused the prayer. So it's been incredible.
wow.
So I had to be obedient in what God asked me to do first. And then in 2018, that's where God asked me to do the Precious Baby Project. And that was also a prayer. I said, God, I pray that you would use my photography to save lives. Because at first I was doing photography like to show the miracle of life in the womb, just to show the miracle of life. So when I prayed that prayer, God, I pray you use my photography to save lives. So I'm thinking they're going to see one of these photos. Somebody's going to see a photo like this and say, you know what? I'm going to choose life. That is a life. I'm going to choose life. So in my mind, this is what I'm thinking with this prayer. But I really believe God put that prayer in my heart. But it was like a month later, and God speaks to me and says, so I started doing these fun scenes with my grandson. And God showed me that he wanted me to do these scenes. Like I create a scene out of fabric. And God showed me that a baby with special needs, they didn't have to be able to see or sit or stand or walk or anything. I just put that baby in the scene. And it was incredible what God did. It was God's message that every life is valuable. Every life is precious. And God used the mainstream media to push his message all around the world to millions of people. It was just incredible. And so that was how it began. So then in 2019, I said another prayer and I said, God, I pray that you would use my photography to bring people to you. So again, I always have something in my mind when I say these prayers. So in my mind, I don't know, somebody's going to see like this beautiful miracle of life and they're going to say, "What must I do to be saved?" I don't know. But that was the prayer that God put in my heart. But what God was thinking was so different. It was nothing that I would have ever imagined. And I was getting ready for church one day. I wasn't even praying. And I felt like God said, "I want you to tell post-abortive women's and men's stories." And it really feels like it was a long time, but my argument with God maybe lasted about 3 minutes, but it was pretty intense. And I was like, no, thank you. I'm thinking this is going to be controversial. I've got all these wild thoughts in my head. I'm like, wait a minute, why? And I was like, why me, God? I'm not post-abortive. Why would you ask me to do that? I'm going to fast forward. Later, I did ask God, why did you ask me to do this? And his answer was, because I knew you'd say yes. It wasn't that I was qualified. It was just that he was looking for someone to say yes. And so my story is always give all your gifts to God and see what he does. So this is what God put on my heart. And in that little struggle that I had, a few minutes there struggling with God, this is always a hard thing to admit. And I apologize to anybody post-abortive. But part of my question was, can they really be forgiven? And I didn't even know that was in my mind. I didn't know that I thought that. But all of a sudden, when God's asking me to do this, I'm like, wait a minute, they can be forgiven of that? And how could I not know that they could be? But God had to reveal that also what was in my heart and in my mind. And God showed me his great heart of love and compassion for these post-abortive women and men. And I couldn't stop bawling for the next few days. Whenever I thought about this great thing that God was asking me to do, I would just weep. And I said, okay, God, if you love them this much, then yes, I will do this for you. And God told me, I want you to follow me exactly like I tell you. So God showed me that I was going to just make it known what I wanted to do. And God gave me like a list of questions, like leading questions to help these participants, to kind of lead them into answers that I could work with to make photos. And so God said, you'll take their story and you'll make it into photos. And he showed me these photos were to be like dark and somber, very shocking, raw and real. And that way they would get the attention of post-abortive women and men, but also Christians, but also pro-choice people. And that part has been very incredible, actually. So shocking, raw, and real. And then God also showed me that their story is to be on the photo. And the name the people see is the name of that person in that photo, unless the person did want to be anonymous. And really nobody has said that they wanted to be anonymous. So like in this one, this is Lakita, and she said, 1 dead, that was my baby. 1 wounded, that was me. I lived a life with my secret. I buried my emotions deep. And so God showed me, he gave me step by step how to do this one. And I was to do it exactly like he said. And I got a Facebook page, and then somebody helped me do a website. It has been incredible, because I have literally had people from around the world writing to me. And the most beautiful part, remember my prayer, God, I pray you'd use my photography to bring people to you. And I've had people write to me and say, please, can you help me find forgiveness? Can you help me find my way back to God? And I'm just like, okay, God, this was not what I meant. But thank you, Lord, for entrusting me with such a huge work to do. And I always tell the participants when they come, like, there are some people, it's kind of, we do some really intense things during that session. The woman who said, I felt like I was buried alive, we actually found a neighbor who had a hole. If you can imagine when I said, hello, I'm a photographer, and I was wondering if I could use your hole to bury this lady in and take her pictures. I'm telling you, this is how it goes with these sessions, okay? And he's like, I guess. And I'm
He
like,
didn't say, I don't think that's legal, but
and
oh
so
my.
we buried her, and they're like peeking out the windows watching, okay? And so I had it so that her face is like this and like she's clawing out of the ground. But she said she felt like she was buried alive. And so the women go through extreme things, and the men go through extreme things. Actually, with Chuck and Linda, when I said, I see this thing, I said, I know this is so extreme. I'm sure you won't like it. But I said, I see your bodies hugging, but your heads are backwards, showing that you're detached. And they both said, yes, that's it. But then let me just show their healing one. Chuck and Linda, we learned that God still loved us after the abortion. We cried a lot and we opened up our hearts and let God in to restore our hearts and our marriage. So just this beautiful. That was the other thing that God showed me was shocking, raw, and real. But then the very important photos are the healing photos. So I say there were the before photos and then the after. And I put a lot of artistic work and creativity in the before photos. And do you know the ones that everybody always loves the most? It's the after photos.
Of course.
But it's more about the message than it is just the photos, you know. And I always tell the participants when you come, so, you know, crazy things are going to happen during this session. And when we're doing those before photos, they're coming back to those emotions that they had during that time, one of the hardest times of their lives. And I will let them know. So we're going to peel back the scab.
Mm-hmm.
But while that scab is open, God is going to come and pour in more healing oil. And it's been so beautiful to hear the participants say how it was their next step of healing. And I remind them when we're doing the before photos, this is who you were, but look who you are now. So just to pull them out of that, you know, it's like we're just helping the world understand your pain and your regret. But look what God has done in your lives. So I just have to remind them of that and then pray over the participants after. And we pray that God would just use their photos and their stories.
Well, I so wish this was television, but I want to assure you, the listener, that we are going to have links to all of these photos and more on the landing page of this program at lifeissues.org. That's lifeissues.org, and ways in which you can reach out to Angela if you want to use her services. I would have paid good money to be in that neighbor's house as they watched you shovel dirt over that woman in their backyard. I just can't
That
imagine.
would have been.
Okay, I have another similar story to that, though. Another lady said she felt she was bound and gagged. We went out to the local park and there's this pond, and I wanted her to be like right by the pond. And here she is, I'm telling you, bound, hands and feet bound, a gag in her mouth. And this couple comes out from the woods from hiking and they look at us, and I'm like, we're just doing a photo session. I promise. And the lady's like this, and she goes, that's a thumbs up. Her hands are bound, and she's gagged, and she's showing this couple a thumbs up. This couple took my picture and this lady's, just in case that comes up on the news, there's a dead body in the pond. And I told her, I said, when you go home, because men and women, the participants, they can come from all over. We had somebody fly from Alaska just to be a part of this.
Wow.
And she'd come a couple hours, and I said, you've got to make it home safely tonight.
You know, it would have been fun if that woman who was gagged and bound, if when she looked at those hikers, she shook her head in a frantic, no, no, no.
No, that would not have been fun.
I just can't imagine. My next question for you, Angela, was if there are any stories that impacted you most. And we've gotten some hilarious stories. Are there any that were particularly poignant as far as the process?
Okay, well, Tori, I don't know if anybody knows Tori Shaw, but she wrote a book, I Have a Secret, and God is using Tori in an incredible way. If I read her story, it'll tell you her ministry. She says, I spent 17 years never speaking about my abortion. Now I want to share my story, and I'm so grateful that God is using my story to help others find healing. Through my healing process, I have begun a ministry called Not Forgotten Ministries. But what Tori says is, I had a secret for 17 years. So in this photo, now this is going to be kind of incredible for you guys. We went to the former abortion clinic where she had her abortion. This is under the counter where they threw the baby's bodies. And
Oh
she
my.
has her finger to her lips like, shh, I have a secret. So this is actually the cover of her book. I Have a Secret, I think it's called. And that is the deeper we went into that former abortion clinic. There was like a beauty salon school there. I can't even imagine, because even the lady at the front entrance said, "Do you feel it? Do you feel it?" And before we even went in the building, I was telling Tori, wow, there is such a thick darkness. That's before we went into the building. The more we went, the further we went into the building, the heavier the oppression was. And I told her, I said, towards the back of the building, I said, it's the worst here. And Tori told me, this is where they actually did the abortions. And I said, but at this back door. And she said, this is the door that they went out and they threw the bodies into the dumpster. I will never forget that. If there was ever a time that I felt a darkness in my life, it was then. And that night when I went to my hotel room, it's like that oppression came with me and I had to just battle and, Satan, get away from me in Jesus' name. I am doing this work for Jesus and I'm not going to let you stop me. I've never experienced anything so evil in my life, but Tori was so brave to go to that place.
Oh wow.
Her
Yeah.
photos are unbelievable. All of the photos from her session are actually in her book. And one of them is like her getting ready to open the door. And she says, I didn't realize that when I left this place, I'd be different. So she's confidently pushing through the door, going in like, I'm going to do this. And on the one coming out the back door, she's like just hunched over and just like totally changed. And she held on to that secret for 17 years. And now she's free and God is using her to tell so many people her story. But it was incredible what happened for her and for me during that session. That was probably one of the most memorable sessions that I've done.
Well, for those who are interested, we'll put a link so that they can order her book if they would like to. What they need to do is bring in some pastors and or priests and pray that demon presence out of there.
Yes.
Get rid of it.
Yes.
What I was struck by was your creativity and what those photos told a story that as you looked at it, you could absorb and know the bulk of what that woman's story was. It's just amazing. God has called you to this and then given you the ability to serve in so many ways for his kingdom. Paula, Linda, and Chuck, I'd like to ask each of you this question. How did Angela's photography help you in your healing journey? And what was that experience like? Let's start with you, Linda.
I thank Angela so much for allowing us to be part of her ministry, quite honestly. I feel like the experience going to her home and seeing the work that she did to set up these elaborate sets and think through, okay, how can I show this particular person's pain was just amazing. And what that did for me in my healing journey was once the photos were ready and she sent them to us, I was just blown away by how much seeing that physical picture of our pain and our suffering was portrayed in just a few pictures. It's just amazing to tell a lifetime story of pain, guilt, shame, and regret. And I know she just said that she got more comments on her after photos, but there is a lot of work that goes into the before photos, trying to portray that couple, or in our case, that couple, the pain that we experienced together, and to see the picture that comes out, like, wow, she really captured it. And I feel like that was another step in our healing journey because we went through that experience. And during that time that we were there, and then of course afterwards with Chuck and I having several conversations after the session, just we brought up things. Well, do you remember this? Do you remember that? How this went and that went the day of, and just all the weeks that followed the abortion, we were able to move on and bring up different things with each other to, I think, actually get things out in the open between us, things that one remembered and the other one didn't, that propelled us further into our healing. But Angela's work was just amazing. She was very tender, and the way that she questioned us, like she had mentioned before, the way that she greets the person in her home and sets all this up. And then God gave her that list of here are the questions, here are the things that you want to portray in these photos by asking the participants these questions. And I feel like that was very well done in her photos, the before and the after. So that did propel us into another step of healing just by having it done and being able to share them with other people, and also just relive some of the not that so good things about the abortion. And it's amazing what things that Chuck will remember, many from many decades ago, and the things I will remember. But that's helpful to us as a couple to grow in our healing.
Thank you. Chuck?
Yeah, I think that we live today with just an incredible peace and joy, and it's all because of the unbelievable mercy and love of Christ, that he never gave up on us. All these things now we can go back and realize that he kept you together. He blessed you with children. He trusted you again as parents after what we had done. And we are involved in different ministries now. And so many times I would love to just be able to scream from the rooftops, God loves you. He wants to heal you. He wants you back. And we don't have those opportunities that much. We would speak a lot more if we're invited to. It's awkward because we're not going to go out and like promote our speaking about our abortion. It's just that self-promotion just doesn't fit. So for me, what I got out of Angela's work is that even as many decades as we were away from not only the abortion, but in our healing, is that this was another opportunity that those images are so strong and powerful that those could very well touch somebody else and lead them to know God, to know that he wants to heal them and give you his mercy.
That's an understatement, Chuck. An understatement.
Absolutely. And so you can't say that vividly enough, but so that the gift that Angela brings, to the world is that can be seen visually, and it attracts different people that wouldn't, be sitting in a homily or be reading their Bible or, or watching maybe even listening to this radio show, who knows, but they'll see that photograph and that is startling, and it could very well be the key. We would never know about it, but God knows about it.
Thank you. Paula, let's hear from you.
Well, I was not able to sleep one night, and I started looking at Facebook, and I came across this picture that Angela had done that particular week, and I can't even tell you the name of it, but it was a picture of a mother holding a blanket as if there was a baby in it, and there was no baby in it. It
Yellow
just
blanket.
made me cry. I just bawled my eyes out when I looked at that, wondering if that's how my mother felt, when she was pregnant for me, before she knew I was okay. Going into the abortion clinic, I just can't even imagine what she went through. But I wrote Angela this long email because I couldn't sleep. And she got up in the morning and she read the email and she said, "You need to tell your story." And I said, "What?" She was the first person I'd ever told, like outside of my husband and my kids. And she said, "You need to tell your story." She said, "It's powerful." And I said, "Really?" And we talked back and forth a little bit. And finally, she convinced me. She said, "I'm coming to Maine to see my parents." She said, "If you could meet me in Old Orchard Beach, I'd love to do a photography session with you." So I did. So I was on a rock with no shoes on in this long, flowy wedding dress. And she had some kind of a scarf that her husband was in the water. My husband was on the other side, so I didn't fall in. It was quite comical. I said, "How is she ever going to get anything out of this?" But I was really amazed. Anyway, she has my hands. She told me to look up at the ceiling and raise my hands. And when I did, the scarf went in the air and I'm like that. And it was like I was going to heaven right then and there, and that's what it makes me think of when I see it. But she's inspired me a lot. I've told my story to a few places. And before I even told anyone personal about my story, I met a young lady at church who was going to have an abortion the next day. And I talked to her and told her about me. And I said, "Nobody knows this story. It's just me telling you." She didn't get the abortion. And
Ooh.
if she was the only reason that I had to know this story, that was good enough for me. So years later, when Angela told me I really need to tell my story, my children, Tammy, David, Brian, and Lindsay, all said, Mom, go for it. I even think Grandma would approve. Of course, my mom's been gone all this time.
Yeah.
She said, I think Grandma would approve for this. And my son Brian said, if it saves one child, it'll be worth it.
Well, Paula, Linda, and Chuck, you all have incredible stories. What would you say to someone who is contemplating an abortion? Paula, you mentioned that you've been there before. What did you say to that woman?
I told her my story in the beginning and waited for her to tell me that she was going for an abortion the next day, or that was her plan. And when she told me, she started to cry. And I said, You don't have to. I said, There's always other answers besides that. And I didn't know about options for women at that time, which we have right here in our area that help you with all those decisions. But she hugged me and we prayed together. And when her grandmother told me the next week that she didn't go through the abortion, I was very pleased.
Linda and Chuck, what would you say?
Chuck just scribbled on a piece of paper and reminded me of a more recent connection that I had with a young girl who chose life after a couple of times that I met with her. They actually go to our parish, but her mother didn't want to reveal their identity completely. So I went and met the young girl. She was a junior or senior in high school, probably a junior because she was contemplating college choices, and her boyfriend became pregnant. And like I said, that her mom reached out to me anonymously and she wanted to remain anonymous. And anyway, so I met with her a couple of times, just sitting on the park bench, just trying to get to know her as a person a little bit more and about her boyfriend. And she said that the boyfriend didn't want to have anything to do with the baby. And if she proceeded and wanted to go ahead, that he would never speak to her again and wouldn't become part of the baby's life. And she was torn. She was like on the fence, didn't know what to do. Her parents, being devout Christians that they were, supported whatever decision she made. Of course, they were praying and hoping and pleading with God that she would choose life. So she was probably very early in the pregnancy when I met with her a couple of times, and probably maybe like two months along. And so then after those couple of meetings, her mom would text me every now and then and said, we're holding our breath. We hope that she makes the right decision. She was getting ready to go to college and all that the following year. So anyway, long story short, she ended up choosing life. And shortly after the baby was born, I got a text message from her mom showing us a picture of her holding the baby, and she was just overjoyed. And of course, her mother was just thrilled that she had chosen life. So like Paula just mentioned, if everything that we do in our ministry and speaking out when it's painful and telling our story, if that saves the life of one child, then it's all for God's glory and his good.
Yeah, I would say that at the time that we learned that Linda was pregnant, we were literal temporary insanity because we were so afraid, so ashamed that we shut down the rational part of our brain and we were vulnerable. And I really understand that crisis when you're pregnant and you weren't planning on being pregnant, and you have whatever your plans are in your life. My advice would be pause. You have time. You don't have to make an instant, immediate choice to have an abortion. It's irreversible. It's one of the things I say in my testimony is that we made the one most devastating choice that we could possibly make that's irreversible. If I could do anything in my life to have gone back and have taken the time and the prayer or the discussion with somebody else to really understand what we were about to do, there's no way we could have done it.
No.
There's no way we could have done it.
Angela, based upon our conversations, I'd like you to weigh in here also. What would your advice be to a young girl or a young couple who are anticipating having an abortion?
I would let them know that this baby, not an accident.
No.
It's not an accident. To them, this baby might be a huge surprise, but to God, it's not a surprise. And that God has a great plan for that little life. And if they would just trust God, that God will work it out for them. And there are great resources and people who can help them. There is so much help out there, and there are people who love them and care about their situation. Like Chuck said, that was so good. Stop and wait. There's no need to jump to something. Look and see what the options are, and just realize there is a beautiful life inside of you.
I just want to take this moment to tell our listeners once again how creative, Angela, you are in sharing those stories in ways that would have never occurred to me in a million years. And anybody who looks at them are going to be inspired by that. So I hope that you will go to our landing page at lifeissues.org and check them out. Angela, what kind of feedback have you gotten from your pictures?
It's been incredible. People saying, I don't want this pain. I'm going to keep my baby. A lot of Christians saying, thank you for helping us see that everyone has a story. I feel like so much of this is for Christians as well as it is for pro-choice people, because sometimes we're just slamming people who've had an abortion, and all we're doing is pushing them further and further away from God. And they are the people who see their need. They see, I've done something wrong. I'm in need of forgiveness. But a couple messages that really got me several times, that the pictures went viral. And when they went viral, it was because of like some group, like a feminist group, that feminist group. It was so awful. The stuff they said about me, the stuff they said about the woman. And I prepare the participants. If this goes viral, there are going to be people who are going to say bad stuff. And that's why they have to have some level of healing before they come to me, just in case it would go viral. But two separate occasions, two separate people. But this one woman writes to me and says, I want you to know, first of all, that I am pro-choice. And nothing has ever caused me to reconsider that until I saw your photo.
Wow.
And she said, I just want to tell you, don't stop what you're doing.
Oh.
And that right there, it makes it all worth it. There's been time of suffering because of just the awful feedback that has come. I had to turn off the reviews because it was so bad what people were saying, and they were telling people to come in and give me bad reviews. But then when I turned the reviews back on, I let my page know, and they came and they it was amazing. So they covered up all those really, really bad reviews. So it's come from both sides. And no matter what, I know God has called me to proclaim the truth, however it is that I am doing it. I say, when God was handing out creativity, I think I said, please and thank you. And it's crazy. Like the creativity, it's like maybe a little bit craziness in there, but it comes out. And I just say, God, take all of my gifts, however you can use them. All I pray, Lord, is that you would be glorified. And I have been blown away. And I say, thank you, Lord, for choosing me. Thank you, Lord, for using me. And since COVID, it's been a little more quiet. It comes in little waves. Also, Facebook doesn't show my work as much anymore. So it's like, I want people to know I am still here. I am ready and willing and wanting to help you tell your story. So I'm just so thankful for everything.
I started to chuckle when you mentioned the feminists, because I know that whenever they get on their rampage, it always backfires on them in some way. So, okay, one last question I have for Paula, Linda, and Chuck. What have people said to you personally regarding the pictures and yours in particular? Paula?
That the pictures that Angela has done are beautiful, and it definitely portrays, because on her picture, she took a side view of my scar on the side of my face. And I think she said something like from scars to forgiveness or something about the scar on the side of my face. And it's just liberating. They embrace it. My pastor knows my story now. And so when we talk about a miracle or God having the last word, he goes, yeah, we know how that works, don't we? And he's just wonderful. So I wanted to mention, when I was born in the 7th month, and I weighed 3 pounds and an ounce. And my father's wedding ring fit on my wrist like a bracelet. I was in the hospital for 3 months in the incubator, I'm not sure. But they had to give me oxygen. And when they gave me oxygen, they didn't regulate it like they can today. And they gave me too much, which ruined my lungs, which I did not know about till I was about 60 years old. So I've been dealing with a breathing issue as well. And I also thought it might be nice to mention that Lyric had an interview with me, and we did pictures, and we were supposed to be broadcasted at the Super Bowl 2 years ago, and somehow they had filled it all up, which they really didn't, but that's what they told her.
Yes.
But a bunch of us were supposed to be on the Super Bowl, but President Trump saw it because he was the president at that time. It was before Biden, but he did see the presentation.
Well, thank you. Linda, let's hear from you.
Okay, so I remember after our pictures were done, not receiving a lot of comment, but the people that we are closest to in our parish, I told a few of them about it so they would go to Angela's site and see them. We just got glowing reviews and some people in tears talking to me about, how did it go and did it bring up the pain again, and just glowing reviews about Angela's creativity. And, again, we turned it around and said it's part of our healing journey and it's going to glorify Christ by bringing those wounded people to him and hopefully reach out for healing themselves.
Yeah, and I think, Angela, we came to see you before COVID.
Mhm.
So I'm going to say 18 or 19, somewhere in there. And two things. One, I have an absolutely horrible memory, so I don't retain a lot of things. Secondly, I'm hardly ever on Facebook. What I do remember, though, just generally, is that the comments were favorable. They were supportive of us and appreciative of Angela's work. So it was a testament to what God can do, with your gifts and our healing. And it encouraged me to realize that I don't have to know, and I don't know what impact those images are having, but they're out there and they're there, for God to use as he wills.
Thank you. Angela, Paula, Linda, and Chuck, thank you so much for being on the program today. It's been a real blessing to have you on.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's
for
been a
asking.
blessing to us as well.
Well, Brad, to see the work and to hear the stories has been an inspiration to me. I joke sometimes I'm a little bit of a fuddy-dud when it comes to art. It's not that often that I can see something and I really appreciate it. But I tell you what, Angela's work, it just cuts right through all of that. It's so obvious, the impact, the influence, the power that it has to reach outside of, traditionally pro-life spaces and penetrate in and change the culture of even the most calloused hearts to show the sanctity of human life.
Well, unlike you, Victor, I absolutely love art. And in my worldly trips, I have pictures all over the house of street vendors where I've purchased their art. And every time I look at her photos and see how God inspired her to tell a very unique story right in a still shot, gosh, that amazes me.
Well, and I think her work is such an example of doing whatever you're going to do for the glory of God. And it's an inspiration to me, and I suspect an inspiration to many others, that no matter what talents God has given you, no matter what sphere of influence he's put in your life, you have a unique potential to reach people in a way that maybe nobody else could do. And she's living that out through her unique ministry. But all of us have something like that we can pursue.
Yes, and she certainly found her talent. And for all of you who are listening to this podcast, you must go to the landing page and check out what she's done.
I want to echo that sentiment. Visit our website, lifeissues.org, where you'll see some of her work. You'll also find out more about post-abortion healing, and you'll find a link to the book that she mentioned, as we discussed, from Tori Shaw about. And you'll also see the book that we discussed, authored by Tori Shaw, as she tells her story of her abortion and the secret that she had held. Again, that's available at lifeissues.org. Be sure to go and share those resources with your friends, your family members, and your community. I also want to encourage you, while you're at our website, lifeissues.org, to join the Life Defenders today. You can be a daily part of our work together to promote a culture of life across America. Giving monthly, no matter how much, is a tremendous commitment to the pro-life movement. And though we might not all be fantastic photographers, we can support vital pro-life education through a monthly donation. Your giving enables the very creation of this show. So help us do more for the babies by becoming a Life Defender today. Again, you can easily sign up on our website, lifeissues.org, and be sure to tune in next week for another Straight Talk on Life Issues.